Welcome back to the Bryan Devore Connection. I'm your host, Bryan Devore. Navigating friends and family ties. How do you set healthy boundaries? It's a great question. It's a very important topic. So here to talk about that topic is an expert on that subject is Dr. Kramer. Karen, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, Bryan.
Good. I'm glad you came to talk about this because it's a very important topic. I learned about this when I was going through my divorce, kind of the first taste of setting boundaries. Tell us about first yourself and what you do.
Oh, I love it. Well, I help transform women's lives, and more specifically focusing on women going through and after divorce. And as you know, boundaries are helpful when it comes to not only in the marriage, but afterwards as well.
Right. Why do you feel, and why is it true that boundaries are important?
Well, there's some research out there that first of all says that there's 27% within the United States of adults who have some form of family estrangement, which is basically you're cut off completely.
Wow.
Okay, we can think about that in divorce, for example, where there's just families that go separate ways in loyalty. And with that, I've also found as I've been working with clients, specifically those going through divorce, is there's opportunities to work around that. Like really, what is it that I want as I'm communicating with an ex, communicating with the kids, communicating with the ex-in-laws, new relationships. So it's an opportunity to think about what is it that I want right now and prevent any further deterioration, especially when kids are involved.
So, and it's interesting you say that. You talk about boundaries with children. I learned about that when I was going through my divorce, about having boundaries not just with my ex-spouse, but sometimes with my children.
Yes.
Because a lot of times as parents, we just want to be open and vulnerable and available for our children 24/7 with everything, but I have to have my boundaries with there too, and it can be kind of hard. What are boundaries? How do you define what that looks like?
Oh, good question. So as I was driving here, I was thinking about this. Like when you're on the freeway, you have the guardrails. You know that there's traffic that goes this way, there's traffic that goes that way. I know when I come to a stoplight, red means stop, green means go, right? Think about the roadways and the traffic ways as boundaries. So how does that play into our life is that it is an opportunity to say within this relationship with this person, in my home, at the dinner table, whatever that boundary is, this is the way we want to interact with each other. It creates that emotional safety and trust and in that environment, knowing what to expect.
Right, okay, great. So now we know what boundaries are, but we got to figure out how we're going to actually institute them. So you've identified pretty much 5 ways to bring boundaries into your life. Let's talk about those. The first one, clarify your wants.
Yes. So as I'm working with individuals, I say, what do you want? Typically, it's what I don't want. He or she did this or said this, right? All the don'ts. So part of the first thing is just to clarify, what do I then want in a relationship? And also boundaries are something where when somebody steps over the boundaries, I'm clear about what I don't want, as well as going into a new relationship or blended family. Now that I'm stepping into something new, what do I want in that environment? So clarifying the wants, but typically it starts with what I don't want.
Right, exactly. Narrow out the stuff you don't want, then what's left is what you do want. Dream makers and boundary breakers. Tell us about that.
Which helps clarify what we do want. So I typically start off with, what's important to you in the context of relationships? Just an open question, any kind of relationship, and really narrow it down. Like when it's coming into, well, starting to step back into the dating relationship again, or communication with my kids, whatever it is. What are the typical relationships that you want? And not the laundry list of what you want, like I'm getting in dating again. This is a laundry list of everything I want. But what are the top 2 or 3 that if you really had this would really make the type of relationship you're working with? That's the dream maker, the 2 or 3 that are really key in that relationship. And then what are the 2 or 3 things that if this comes about, this is a boundary breaker for me. This is a no-no. This is where I have that strong conversation or I let that person go.
Great.
Yeah.
So really being crystal clear on who you are and what you're looking for, what's important to you. But before you jump into having a conversation with someone about this, you have to prepare for the conversation.
Yes. So in preparing, thinking about what is the time to prepare. And the best time to prepare is not when you're in the heat of a conversation, like you're at a family dinner and Uncle Bob says or does something again. This is not the time in the heat of the moment to have that conversation with Uncle Bob, right?
Probably won't go very well.
It won't go over well, and it may not go over well on either parts, right? So it's having the time when both of you are in a calm situation, having a conversation which it's about this is how it's impacting me, not you, okay? Verbally and finger all about you. It's how is it impacting me? And also being clear about what are the facts? Like when this happened, this is the impact it had on me. And being crystal clear about what is it that you want in the future. So keep it future focused. When this happens, this is what I'm expecting in the future.
Got it. I like that. I remember learning about I statements.
Yes.
You know, I thought at first my therapist was talking about, you know, the phone or the watch. Not that kind. Yeah, I statements, not that kind of thing. But making it about yourself and, you know, where you're coming from, not assigning blame.
Yes.
Because then people put up their guardrails, and they don't even want to have the conversation.
Then it puts up the defense, and there it goes in that conversation.
So step 4 is consequences and coping. Talk about that.
So consequences and coping. Consequences are more about when that person, and I say when, not if, when that person steps upon your boundaries, especially if like Uncle Bob always steps on your boundaries, always says or does something, expect that you can have that conversation with Uncle Bob, but also accept that if this has been going on for a while, Uncle Bob will do it just because you're getting comfortable with the boundaries. So, or when you're, you know, establishing them with somebody new, they may or may not step on those boundaries, but just communicating as to when this happens, this is what I'll do. I will walk away. I will stop communicating, stop emailing, texting, calling. I will not attend that event. So just calmly, like, communicate, what are the consequences if that boundary is stepped over? And the second is, after you've elicited the consequences, especially if these are issues that are hot topics for you, like anger you or sadness or hurt, what are your coping skills that you have? This boundary has been overacted, you have elicited the consequences, you've walked away. What are the coping mechanisms? And that could be something simple as going for a walk, knowing that you have a friend you can turn to talk to or to text, or journaling or breathing or anything that really just brings down the emotion from your boundary being stepped on.
And that's a great point. It's hard in that heat of the moment to really have that self-awareness sometimes, because you're caught in that fight or flight mode and you don't have that self-awareness to say, okay, I'm in that same situation, I've been here before, I need to step back, take a look at what's going on and figure out what, you know, how I need to go from here. You want to start fighting back, and that doesn't end well either.
No, it doesn't.
Step 5 is follow-up.
So think about this. If you had a conversation, I have a conversation with Uncle Bob about what I expect during family dinner time together. Uncle Bob steps on my boundaries. I've already explained to Uncle Bob, like, this is what I expect in the future, this is what's going to happen. But if I don't act upon those consequences when Uncle Bob steps on my boundaries again, I'm just telling Uncle Bob that I'm not serious. I'm not taking my own boundaries serious enough. And we start back in that cycle again. So if you're going to do this, follow up on those consequences. Otherwise, you're just training that other person that they can go ahead and step all over you again.
Right. And so to that point, what if people do have difficulty with boundaries?
Yes, and many of my clients do. So it's going through the process and saying, what are some beliefs that you have underneath? Like, for example, I'm working with a lot of women who are people pleasers, right? That if I create boundaries, that means that they're not going to like me. I'm not lovable. Because I've just gone through a divorce, maybe I've set the belief that I'm not lovable. So if I set boundaries, then who's going to love me? I mean, just the beliefs that we have. Also the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, or our stories about the other person. Just raising those to the awareness and working with somebody like a therapist or like a coach who, as an outsider, can see what some of those patterns are that are there, to call attention to that. Because when we're in the middle of it, we don't see what those patterns are. We're not aware of what those beliefs are that are limiting us from seeing other possibilities there, or the stories we're creating in our mind or about somebody else that are there. So working with somebody else to identify what those are and start to unravel what those are. So releasing that, or even having a conversation around how can you come to acceptance if it's the other person, that coming to acceptance, or even how to have those conversations. Now, I've gone through the 5 steps, but obviously those 5 steps are going to be tailored depending upon the own person's needs, wants, stories, and beliefs, as well as the situation and that other person.
For 100%,
the situation they're
it's
in.
everything together, and their ability to really have that growth mindset to be able to see how it works, try it out, get past the fear.
Yes.
Of this isn't going to work, or if you're a people pleaser, getting out of your comfort zone and seeing the success of it, because it does work. What else do you want to share about boundaries?
Good. Well, I have a short example in that, and then I'll go to a last statement here. There was, and I was reflecting on this, boundaries can be in any situation, like with a person specifically. It also can be going into a certain situation, like going into a family or holiday meal, a time together. So you're also, by setting your boundaries, you're also creating safety for other people. For example, a couple months ago, I had a celebration of life for my mother and my brother. Skip back 10 years ago, had a celebration of life for my father when the current wife of a family member got in an altercation with the ex-wife, okay? And in that process, that actually created, I was not involved in it, I heard about it afterwards, but it created some negative dynamics where still some family members today, 10 years later, are still hurt by some of that. So going into this new celebration of life, I set out a norm and said, everybody, anybody, family and friends who want to come and celebrate are here to celebrate. And I want to make sure that they're safe. Remember the guardrails, they're in my road right now, my freeway, right? And anybody who comes is also going to be respectful to other people. If you choose that, and here's the list I outlined, here's all the people. If you feel that you cannot be respectful to other people, you're welcome not to attend. You can honor them in different ways, but you're welcome not to attend. Like, I wasn't shaming them or anything. This is the environment. And by the way, if you come and also you are showing, and they knew underlying what I meant by this past experience, if you then show that you're being disrespectful to another member, anybody who attends, you will be asked to leave. So I just set up that norm for the key family members that knew what I was talking about. So 2 things happened. One is the family members, there were 2 that involved in this altercation, like started the altercation 10 years ago, a day before chose not to attend. So that then allowed 8 other family members who were on the other side of this to attend, and they knew in this environment that was the norm, that I was going to make sure that they were safe and they were protected, and that if anybody in the environment was there who was not going to show that, was going to be asked to leave. So think about it, this is around setting boundaries and being clear about it. It's not just for you and the other person, there's other people that are there. So for situations and for relationships. And the last is, is if you as an individual feel that I'm not going to be liked or loved or respected, again, there may be a belief there, by setting boundaries, then know that those people who truly love and appreciate you will eventually learn to respect your boundaries. And if they don't, they may not necessarily be the type of people you want to be in a healthy relationship with.
Right. Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into this. We could probably talk for another hour or 2 about this. We don't have the time,
Yes.
but your contact information is on the screen, so we have your web address, phone number, and so forth. If you're going through a situation like this, or if you know someone who could use the wisdom and advice that Dr. Karen Kramer can share, please reach out and give her a call, and I'm sure she'd be happy to set up an appointment and talk to you more about setting boundaries and give you some guidance on how to build those healthy relationships that you're looking for. Karen,
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
My pleasure.
Yeah, wonderful.
Beautiful.